So I've been thinking a lot about empathy lately, and specifically this idea that we're taught in relationship spaces to meet people where they are, to validate, to understand, to hold space. And I actually agree with all of that. But what I have been running into is something very interesting, where when I try to do that, it doesn't always feel like it's helping. So I was in a conversation recently where somebody was sharing a lot of their experiences about something painful that was happening to them. And in that moment, I could feel exactly what I was supposed to say, like what we're taught to do in these relationship spaces. Like, that sucks, that shouldn't have happened. I'm so sorry you're going through this. But at the same time, I could also see the pattern that they were in and how the way they were relating to the experience was keeping them in the uncomfortable experiences that they were having. And so I just kind of froze because in that moment, the only honest, authentic thing that I could say was, I understand. And that didn't land for them. It felt cold, it felt distant. And that's when I realized that I am sitting in this very uncomfortable paradox where if I meet somebody where they are, it feels like I'm enabling it. But if I say what I actually see, it feels like I'm invalidating them. And so that's what I want to talk about today. And the funny thing is like, I've actually been on both sides of this, right? There's been so many times in my life where I was the one that was stuck in the loop. But I'm going to give you a very specific example that's pretty recent. So I started my online business while I was receiving unemployment. I remember a very specific moment where my unemployment was about to end. And I was in a bit of a panic because I didn't want to give up my online platform, but I also didn't want to go work for somebody else. I didn't want to go back to a 9 to 5 job. I had been pouring so much of myself into this space for the last year. It felt like if I gave it up, it would be a failure. That's when a friend of mine stepped in and said, "Hey, Jackie, I am willing to help you keep your platform alive. I will cover your basic living expenses until your business, is self-sustainable." And so over the next few months, there was about 3 or 4 times where I would start running out of money and my scarcity programming would kick in. My stress response would come on. I would go into panic and I would start being like, oh my God, this isn't working. I'm running out of options. I need to come up with a new idea. Maybe I need to like just cancel my entire platform. And we had this pattern where I would spiral, I would get all worked up, and then they would step in and they would say, like, what do you need? Like, just tell me what you need, and I will send you over some money. And then that would make me feel better for a little while. But then there was this one specific time. I think it was like the fourth time. Same pattern, same conversation. I started to panic. Like, why isn't my business there yet? I've poured so much into it. Maybe I should quit. Maybe I need to get a different job. Even though, like, none of that was what I actually wanted. This time, instead of stepping in with that reassurance, they just said to me, okay, if that's what you feel like you need to do. And I remember, God, I remember that fucking moment so clearly. I remember my stomach just dropped. I remember a wash of heat in my whole body. And the only thing I could think of was, wow, that was cold. And then my brain started to jump in and it started to say things like, God, they lack empathy. Are they seriously going to just let you struggle? They're seriously going to let you give up. I thought they were your friend. And I was fucking mad. And I ended up, ending and leaving the conversation. And then we probably didn't talk for about 3 or 4 days after that. In those 3 or 4 days, I did a lot of reflecting. And in that reflection is when I actually saw the pattern reveal itself. The belief that if I had to ask for support meant that I was failing. This was what was running all of that behavior. So instead of asking directly for help, which they said they would do from the very beginning, I was recreating the same situation of stress over and over again because I just didn't want to ask, because I was hoping they would offer so that I didn't have to feel the discomfort of asking. And now I see that every single time that I would spiral like that and they would step in and offer, it kept me in the pattern. It didn't give me a chance to actually look at the belief that was driving the pattern, because the block was never a lack of support. The block was my relationship to receiving support. So, this is the moment where I really started to see something clearly, because we're told that empathy is meeting people where they are. But what if where they are is inside of a distortion? Because what I've noticed, both in myself and both in working with clients and both even just in my everyday life, when somebody is running a pattern, what they are looking for is usually agreement or validation, or just for somebody to actually just join them in whatever it is that they're doing to confirm their story or to reinforce their perception. And then all of that is getting labeled as empathy. And so when that is what somebody is expecting, anything that doesn't match it doesn't feel like empathy. So back to the beginning, when I responded to somebody with, I understand, I'm not agreeing with their story. I am understanding what's actually happening. I'm understanding their nervous system. I'm understanding how they're perceiving the situation. I understand the beliefs that are shaping that perception. And I understand that from where they are currently sitting, it makes sense that they're having this particular experience. But I also understand that it's not my job to fix it, that I don't have a desire to fix it, because when you love everyone unconditionally, you don't need to change them. But for a lot of people, because I'm not reinforcing their patterns, this response gets perceived as cold. This is what I've really started noticing in my personal life and my professional life when it comes to people who are lost in patterns. The people that are genuinely ready to shift something, they ask questions. They get curious, they're open, they're trying to see the situation from a new perspective, from a way that they can't yet see. But the people who have no desire to move out of where they are, they just repeat the story over and over without any curiosity. These people are not actually available for anything different. And it doesn't mean that they're wrong. It doesn't mean that they're less evolved. It just means they are not in a space where they can receive it, where they can receive a new perspective. So if I try to come in with perspective, it doesn't land. It just feels like invalidation. So I have really had to look at what it means to meet somebody where they are. And from what I see now is that it doesn't mean joining them in their distortions. It means seeing clearly where they are without leaving yourself to go there with them. Like, I can sit beside you as you're running your distortions, but I'm not going to participate in feeding what's keeping you stuck. And I could feel this happening in real time, because where they were, their attention was on the situation, on what happened, on the other person, and the way they were making sense of it. And I could feel the pull to like go where there with them, to help them make sense of it, to validate it. But again, like, I've seen this enough to know that when I follow somebody there, we don't actually move anything, because real support doesn't follow you outside of yourself. It holds its position while you're trying to leave. And I think what this whole thing has shown me is that relationships with the highest integrity are the ones that don't participate in your patterns. They don't feed the loop. They don't rescue you from the very thing that might actually show you something different. And that doesn't mean that they don't care. It just means that they're not abandoning themselves to meet you in a place that isn't actually helping you. And I think that if you've ever felt like somebody wasn't being empathetic, it might be worth asking yourself, like, were they not supporting you or were they just not participating in the pattern that you were in? Because those are two very different things. From my personal experience, some of the most important relationships in my life were the ones that didn't follow me into my patterns, even when I didn't understand it at the time. And I think that that's the difference between feeling supported and actually being supported.